If you want to open up in Matthew 21, we're going to be looking at Palm Sunday here in the Gospel of Matthew. And we're going to be really between Matthew 21 and Psalm 118, kind of back and forth here for the study. Matthew 21, verse 1. And let's just read verses 1 to 16 together here. Matthew 21, verse 1. And when they had approached Jerusalem and had come to Bethphage, to the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village opposite you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied there and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. And if anyone says something to you, you shall say, 'The Lord has need of them,' and immediately he will send them." Now this took place, that what was spoken through the prophet might be fulfilled, saying, verse 5, "Say to the daughter of Zion, Behold, your king is coming to you, gentle and mounted on a donkey, even a colt, the foal of a beast of burden." And the disciples went and did just as Jesus had directed them, and brought the donkey and the colt, and laid on them their garments on which he sat. And most of the multitude spread their garments on the road, and others were cutting branches from the trees and spreading them in the road. Verse 9, and the multitudes going before him, and those who followed after were crying out, saying, "Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest." And when he had entered Jerusalem, all the city was stirred, saying, "Who is this?" And the multitudes were saying, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee." And Jesus entered the temple and cast out all those who were buying and selling in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who were selling doves. And he said to them, "It is written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer,' but you are making it a den of thieves," or a robber's den. And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. Verse 15. But when the chief priests and scribes saw the wonderful things that he had done, and the children who were crying out in the temple and saying, "Hosanna to the Son of David," they became indignant and said to him, "Do you hear what these are saying?" And Jesus said to them, "Yes. Have you never read, out of the mouth of infants and nursing babes, thou hast prepared praise for thyself?" So this was a significant event in the history of Israel. It was a significant event in the history of Christianity and Jesus Christ, his life, his ministry. And really, it was a significant event that still affects us today, because this is where Jesus was presented as the Jewish Messiah. And initially, he was presented and received and acknowledged as Israel's Messiah. Of course, it wasn't long after this that he was then rejected. And these same crowds who were declaring, "Hosanna to the Son of David, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord," would be the same ones who would be crying out, "Crucify him, crucify him." And so how quickly the masses can change their minds and flip their opinions, even when it comes to life and death. Certainly for Jesus, that was the case. He was initially accepted and recognized as the Messiah, and within just a few short days, he was rejected and hung on the cross. Let's look at this verse by verse here, starting again in verse 1. And when they had approached Jerusalem and had come to Bethphage to the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village opposite you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied there and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. And if anyone says something to you, you shall say, 'The Lord has need of them,' and immediately he will send them. Now this took place that what was spoken through the prophet might be fulfilled, saying, Say to the daughter of Zion, Behold, your king is coming to you, gentle and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a beast, a burden. And so as Jesus was coming into Jerusalem, he was fulfilling prophecy after prophecy after prophecy. And the New Testament recorders, the authors of the New Testament, tell us oftentimes when Jesus is fulfilling an Old Testament prophecy as the Messiah. And this prophecy was from Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9, that's being quoted in verse 5. If you want to jot that down and look it up later, you can do so. But this is almost a direct quote from the prophet Zechariah. Again, say to the daughter of Zion, Behold, your king is coming to you, gentle and mounted on a donkey. Now, this would have been an unusual sort of a prophecy. It was given hundreds and hundreds of years before this. Zechariah was somewhere probably around the time of 500 to 600 BC. And this prophecy is of a king, a Messiah, riding on a donkey. Not even just a donkey, but riding on a foal of a donkey. So it would have been an unusual scene. It was an unusual prophecy. Generally, a king would come riding in on what? On a horse. On a stallion, on the most beautiful stallion that you could find in the kingdom. That's the horse that the king generally would ride into a city on. However, many of you probably know that when a king would present himself on a horse, what did it mean? It meant he was going to war. He was positioning himself for battle when he was on his horse. If you see a king on a donkey, this is more of a parade of a safe place. This is not a battle. This is not a war. There's not a threat. The king's guard is down. He's not riding in on a horse where he could go and take off, or he could attack if he needed to. This is a very vulnerable animal to be riding on, a young colt, a donkey. And so you have this scene of Jesus, this big man, this carpenter, who's riding in on this little donkey, coming down into Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives, the eastern part of the city there on the hill, coming down into the city of Jerusalem. It would have been quite a scene, this giant grown man on this small animal riding in to the city, and fulfilling prophecy that was given hundreds of years earlier that specifically would be related to the Messiah's coming to save Israel. Verse 6 says, And the disciples went and did just as Jesus had directed them, and brought the donkey and the colt, and laid on them their garments on which he sat. And so they made for him a saddle, so that he would be comfortable riding on this colt with their garments. Verse 8, And most of the multitude spread their garments in the road, and others were cutting branches from the trees and spreading them in the road. Hence, we get the phrase Palm Sunday, because it's believed that they were also cutting palm branches and putting palm branches down in front of him. So this was quite an event. This was at the time when everybody was there in Jerusalem for the Passover and for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Huge, big deal. Still in Israel today, it's a big deal. A huge deal back at the time of Christ, for the Jews to all come. All of Israel would gather together there in Jerusalem for this holy day, this holiday for the Jews. And Jesus is presented as the Messiah, fulfilling the prophecy from the prophet Zechariah. So these multitude are respecting him. They're honoring him as they put their clothes down, as they put these branches down in the road. It would have been a great spectacle, a big scene, a huge event taking place.